Hello, Icad number 16. So I always say a lot. I do apologize about that. I have been doing all kinds of paper bases and paint bases and things like that for my Icads, but if you're new to my channel or new to me and my artwork, I have a pretty unique, how do I put it, like position in the arts and crafts industry. I own my own company called Studio, where we manufacture chipboard and stencils and flair. I am the marketing and artistic director for Viva Las Vegas Stamps, which is a rubber stamp company. And I have a huge, wide area of responsibility there. One of the things is that I get to design stamps, which is by far my favorite thing to do out of all of my responsibilities. Also, I design paper and paper collections, including die cuts and stickers and stamps and stencils and things like that for a Polish company called 7 Studio. So today I am using one of my newest paper lines for 7 Studio called Dreamscapes, and I am using the 6x6 collection. And this piece specifically had a beautiful horizon line on it, and it's kind of like a mauvey pink color, and then almost like a lemonade yellow. Like, it's a very cool page. And I mean, who am I kidding, right? Like, I love all the pages. They're all very cool. But this, I kind of played with horizons a little bit in this page, in this collection. So this is the 6x6 version, which we take the 12x12 and completely shrink it down so that you have the 12x12 large patterns and then the 6x6 mini patterns, which is always very cool for cards and tags and things like that, or in this case, ATCs. So I took the 6x6 and then I trimmed it down into the 3x5 and I used Yoo-Hoo to glue it to my index card. Then I got out one of my favorite Studio stencils, and this is the Poppy Pods. And there are like 8 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oh, maybe like 10 or 11 of them on the stencil. And I used some heavy gesso. Now this gesso is not marketed as heavy gesso. It's marketed as gesso, artist's version by Blick Art Materials. But I keep it around as my heavy gesso because it has so much extra body to it and I love it. So I used that and my spatula, my Princeton Catalyst, through the stencil to create these really gorgeous poppies on the bottom 2/3 of my card. Then I got out my mini Prima Finnabair art stones, and I am sprinkling them into the buds of the poppies while they're still wet so that they will seep into the gesso and they'll adhere down and add some texture to these beautiful big like poppy pods that are at the top. Would I use gesso as an adhesive normally? No. And I get that question a lot because I do find myself embedding things in it fairly frequently, but that's only when it's already down and already wet. Like, why would I let that dry and then put the stencil down and put gel medium only where the pods are and then, like that seems like too much work to me. As long as the gesso is wet and the pieces that I want to embed into the gesso are not too thick, then it's okay for it to double as an adhesive. But I would not ever use gesso as the adhesive straight off the block or straight off the base. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Okay, so because it was still wet, then I embedded those mini art stones right into it. Only in the pods, I left the stalks blank. And then I heat dried that. Not too much because the gesso is very thick, so if I apply too much heat, then it will bubble up. And I did not want that. I wanted to keep that sort of scraped feel to the gesso. And then I got out my De La Rowney acrylic inks. I don't play with them enough, and I was trying to find a color of something that I had that would go really well with my page, and I didn't want anything bright, but then I didn't want anything too monochromatic. So I picked out this gray because it's light and kind of steely, and it's cooler. It's a cooler gray than a warmer gray, and it just seemed to lend itself really well. It was like the perfect tone I was going for. So I put a little drop of ink on every poppy pod, and then I'm using my brush, a paintbrush, and some extra water to kind of move it around. So what I really extra want is for that gray to seep down into the cracks and crevices and really highlight the shadows. Is that an oxymoron? Highlight the shadows? I want it to really define the shadows that are down underneath all the, or between all the mini art stones that I put in that gesso. So much so that you can see in some areas I am picking up the excess ink because it's sort of a puddle and I would rather it just be in the recesses. I am also making sure to draw the ink down through the stalks of the poppies because I don't want them to be this sort of like oddball white stick shape just hanging out on my card. No problem at all. Just draw that ink. I have plenty of it on my card. I'm just drawing it straight down into those stalks. Also, my stencil itself got a little bit messy, and I wasn't that happy with it at first. And by messy, I mean I wasn't being careful enough, and some of the gesso seeped underneath my stencil, and it kind of splattered. And I'm not that happy with it at this point, but then later I come to enjoy the effect that it has. I did try to darken up some of the areas with a little golden fluid acrylic black, but I wasn't digging it. It's not that it wasn't working, but it just wasn't giving the effect I wanted, so I stopped. And it kind of only happened on one or two of them there. And it's fine, because I know that I can move forward and kind of mask that back into that background. So now I'm just going to make sure that everything's dry, and I am adding a lot of wet mediums, and because it's paper glued to paper, it may expand and then not be held together that well, so keep that in mind. Now I am going back to a tried and true technique that I do all the time, and it's because it's so cool and I can't live without it. I am taking this heavier gesso that I mentioned before, which will be in the supply list, and I am basically dry brushing, but with the tip of my finger. So by doing this, by using the tip of my finger and then making sure that there's hardly any paint on my finger at all, I can rub it across the surface of these micro beads, these art stones, and it's just picking up the very top layered texture of that, and it's helping that gray kind of blend back into the background and drop down into that recess of the texture even more. I do this technique all the time with all kinds of different products and stencils and things like that. And it's just like it highlights so well, and it just creates like a little pop of oomph on top of my texture and highlights the texture, and it's really cool. In between camera takes there, I did stitch around the card real quick because I never put my sewing machine on screen. It's big and clunky and in the way, and I don't think we necessarily need to drag it over here and anything like that. So I just sewed around the edge twice so that it's kind of wonky and has a little bit of character to it. And then I'm going to take the scraps left from that 6x6 piece of paper, and I'm going to fold over onto the top of this card. And at the time, I was trying to mimic some of the other cards where I have put the fabric. Like sometimes, one time I did muslin, one time I did sari ribbon. I was mimicking that feel, but I wanted to keep it more paper based today. So basically I'm just trying in all my Icads to remember all the different things that I enjoy and get kind of down to the nitty gritty of mixed media, and I'm trying to find if I like certain materials over other ones, because my repertoire or my tool base is so large and so varied, and I know that some people can fit their supplies and favorite things into 1 or 2 or 3 carts, and certainly a lot of you can fit your supplies into 1 room. I cannot do that. I am having such a hard time fitting all my supplies into my new art studio in our new house, and it is killing me trying to fit everything in. So I'm kind of using these Icads to really see if I can't weed out things that I don't like But every time I do something new, I remember how much I like it. Like this card is just paper and stencils, and I'm loving it just as much as the ones that are painty and stamps or the ones that are chipboard heavy. I'm not helping myself. Anyways, so I folded over that card and I was mimicking the fabric that I had done on some previous cards. I stapled it on, and I also found this really great saying on a piece of scrap paper that was just laying on my desk. And that has happened to me fairly frequently lately. And that just makes me feel like I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, which, mind you, is not helping me weed out supplies. But the saying that I found is a very imperfect condition. Is that not spot on for everything I'm talking about right now? Can I get a little amen here? Because I'm going a little bit nuts, people. Anyways, the next couple steps you'll see, I show you the card as if I'm finished, and then I put it down, and then I even showed it to my friend Mixed Media Jen, and I thought, man, it doesn't feel complete to me. So I set it down, and then I came back a little bit later, and I got out my trusty, it might be dusty, my trusty white paint pen, my Sharpie water-based marker. And I put some dots all the way around all of the poppies. And earlier I was talking about how some of my gesso had smushed out underneath the stencil. And so this was really cool because the dots that smushed out gesso lent themselves to the dots really well. And everything came out really pretty and nice. And it's an art mark, which Ray Missigman, she does art marks. And I've been practicing in a little art mark journal along with her every few months and just trying to really expand that part of my tool base. And so the dots are an art mark, and then I have these itty bitty little, you could call them crosses or X's or plus signs or whatever they are, little T marks, and I did those all over the page, and they're so small and they're so dainty that they also lent themselves really well to the card, and they just helped balance it out and add one more layer on top of it. So hashtag art marks with Ray Missigman, shout out there. And that's it. Now the card really is finished. So thank you again for joining me. I'm so happy that you're here every day. Please feel free to subscribe. Jen and I have some really amazing things coming up for July for our Mixed Media Moods. If you haven't heard of that, please kind of do a little search and let me know. I'll give you some more information. I bring it up because we're going to be doing a ton more videos for our Mixed Media Moods after Icads are over. And that's it. So thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.